Denise Pinkston and Katherine Peoples are leading the charge to create more affordable and accessible housing. Learn how their work helps ease housing regulations, streamline ADU development, and advocate for equitable lending solutions.
If a homeowner can't borrow to build an ADU to generate income to pay their mortgage because they don't have the income in place today to service that loan, how are they going to get the income from the ADU to pay more money for their mortgage more reliably?
That is a very big challenge. They've got equity, but they don't, in many instances, want to access it or are not knowledgeable on how to access it. Where we can speak to the fact that there is lack of financing, there is lack of or issues with zoning and so forth and so on, that the organization as a whole has been chipping away. That is what we do. We see it firsthand.
I'd like to welcome everybody to the Construction Lending Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Ferris with Land Gorilla, and today we have two very special guests. We have Denise Pinkston, a seasoned real estate and development professional with over 30 years of experience, is the founder and board chair emerita of the Casita Coalition. She has an extensive background in planning and housing policy. She also taught real estate and planning at both San Francisco State University and Mills College. Pinkston has been actively involved in various housing-related committees and boards, working towards easing housing regulations and increasing ADU development. She also wrote several of California's ADU laws. Welcome, Denise.
Thanks, Sean.
And she's also joined by Katherine Peoples, a dedicated social entrepreneur, established HPP Cares, a housing counseling agency focused on educating and providing financial services to underserved communities. She's currently serves as the Casita Coalition Board as vice chair, leading fair housing opportunities. People's expertise extends to her involvement in Cal HFA's ADU working group, where she contributed to increasing ADU financing access. She's an advocate for equitable lending practices and housing solutions, and as demonstrated by her impactful presentations and partnerships with various nonprofits across California. Thank you both for joining the podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks. We're happy to be here.
Great backgrounds and bios. Really excited to have you both on here. And why don't Denise, why don't you give us a little background on the Casita Coalition to get going here?
Sure. So the Casita Coalition founders included professionals from a wide range of fields, city planning, city attorneys, retirees, who needed to make a difference in the housing space before the end of their careers. A lot of us were toward the end of our professional lives. And we realized that the best avenue forward was to unlock 75% of land in most cities that had been cast in amber with single family zoning, unable to change, unable to allow flexibility for families or promote new kinds of families moving into neighborhoods who hadn't bought their house a long time ago. So we founded the Casita Coalition to really improve equity and inclusion in neighborhood scale homes in every neighborhood. And we began with writing state of California-wide ADU laws.
Very exciting. And, we have listeners from all over the U.S. and the ADU subject has been on the podcast many times. Why are ADUs even important in a state like California?
Well, California is short several million units of housing over a 50-year span of time, and there's no silver bullet to solving the housing supply crisis. So you got to try one thing at a time, and the things you try need to be impactful. Allowing ADUs in every neighborhood, in every home, and in multifamily buildings as well was a super impactful way to begin the more housing supply journey that met the needs of homeowners and neighbors where they're at. They're concerned about change in their neighborhoods. They want to see things happen at a neighborhood scale. Homeowners need to take better care of their families or themselves. They need to pay their mortgages with maybe a little extra income, or they need an extra roof to house a family member in need. And ADUs as a solution addresses all of those concerns. You get homes everywhere for all kinds of homeowners to meet them at the needs that they're at. And in a variety in California of different property types. We have single and multifamily ADUs. So we are now allowing more homes on every lot in the state that has residential land uses, and it's super impactful. We've, in just a matter of a few years, achieved 130,000 ADUs in climbing. And we expect, as it gets easier and we remove continuous barriers to the work of the Casita Coalition and others, that we'll see hundreds of thousands of ADUs in California, and that's a head turner for other states. They're now looking to California, what we did, how we did it, as a model for how maybe they can address the housing supply crisis in their states as well.
That's where I was going to go with my next question is, what's happening in California with the housing shortage? I kind of think almost like ground zero, right? The housing crisis is very prevalent here in California, probably more so than a lot of other states. But what's happening on the ADU front, that can be applied in the other states as well?
Sure. So states typically have delegated their zoning authority to cities. That's how the sort of legal structures are set up. And in some narrow instances, for really important policy reasons, the state can take back some of that control. So in the ADU space, state law says cities, you can do many, many things in the housing space and in the ADU space, but in these limited instances, you have to issue a building permit. So that's a really simple model for a state to have when the state itself is responsible for the health and well-being of the entire state and isn't charged with protecting the boundaries of one city at a time, which is really the job of cities. So we're at a point where the housing crisis has been so unaddressed for so long by our cities and counties that states have to step in to protect the overall public health and welfare. So it absolutely is a state job to move into this space, and many states have. California, Hawaii, Colorado, Oregon, Washington, New York, Arizona, all are looking at or have adopted state ADU laws so that they too can help homeowners pay their mortgage, house family members, and have more units in every existing built neighborhood.
Why did you choose ADUs? Why were ADUs the entry point into solving this housing crisis?
Sure. Cities are great engines of experimentation. And I went to planning school. A lot of my colleagues did. And we've spent our 30, 40 years of our professional work lives trying to figure out how to help housing, how to make it easier and better and more affordable for people. And one thing that cities hit on across really mostly the West Coast, but other places, was ADUs. And so Portland, Seattle, Vancouver, New Zealand, New South Wales, Australia, other countries and places figured out that if a city or a region widely legalizes ADUs and gets rid of all those barriers I described that shrink you down to not very much, they get rid of all of them and allow you to have multiple units on a property with just a building permit, it worked. And the lessons that they learned was you can't get rid of just one barrier. You can't just get rid of the parking requirement. Or say you can have 2 units, but then not create any space to put them in setbacks that would disallow them. You have to get rid of all the barriers in order to see a lot more units being produced. So we took all the decades worth of learning from these other places and hovered that up to the level of the state with a very simple, if the unit meets these very straightforward criteria, it's in an existing structure, it's no bigger than 800 square feet, it has reasonable setbacks and a reasonable height limit, which is all defined in state law, you have to issue the building permit. Doesn't matter what other local barriers you have to issue the building permit with no impact fee requirements, no parking, no owner occupancy. And then we saw it take off in California. So anyway, that's kind of how it worked here. But in most, these things are complicated and you can't just kind of make it up and hope it works. You got to really study what worked well somewhere else and adapt.
Yeah, no, I really enjoy following kind of this, for lack of a better word, a journey, right, with ADUs and how you've taken down this big barrier. And I think there were some other state laws that passed, they found the next barrier and they took that one down. They found the next barrier and they've taken that one down. So along this journey, it's addressing the next barrier. So when we look at it today, what are the barriers that are remaining? And I know, Catherine, I'm getting over to the financing side here to, and maybe it is, is financing the thing that's getting in the way of more of these being built today, or what is the next barrier that we're looking at?
Catherine, you want to take that one? Catherine's deep in the weeds with barriers and homeowners, so.
Definitely. I will say it still is a very challenging barrier for our homeowners out there. with regards to getting their projects financing. Many of them are not needing large amounts of funding. And let's back it up a little bit. Let's take it to the point that many of them have 2% interest rates where they were able to get modifications, through the pandemic or prior to the pandemic, where they were able to lock in those low interest rates. So a lot of them are a little skeptical in reaching in and getting financing for that. So yes, that is a very big challenge. They've got equity, but they don't, in many instances, want to access it or are not knowledgeable on how to access it. So that is one of the biggest barriers with regards to this process. I will tell you, when we stepped in as an organization, that was mainly, the biggest piece why the state could not move the $100 million worth of grant funding that Casita Coalition and Denise were able to unlock to allow consumers to have access to funding to build their ADUs. You say, well, wait a minute, what do you mean, Catherine? Denise and the Casita Coalition were able to put out to the state of California and assist with that $150 million to go towards pre-development expenses that consumers, if awarded the grant through CalHFA, would be able to utilize that funding to cover their pre-development cost. Now you say, well, that should be easy. They should be able to get that money out quickly. Unfortunately, the providers at the time were just financial institutions who were requiring refinancing. A lot of folks, like I said, as I alluded to initially in my beginning of my comments, was that they had 2% interest rates. So now you've got people who are with first mortgages that are locked in at the lowest rate possible, and it's affordable, now being given the opportunity to build and create generational wealth or convert an unpermitted garage for additional housing for a loved one, to then in turn, need to have to refinance their homes. So that is why the success of HPP Cares has gone viral with this, and we are that impactful contributor to the foundation of Casita Coalition. So yes, financing is one of the main barriers that is creating a lot of challenges for folks.
Now, tell me a little. Go ahead.
In recognition of that, I was just going to say, there's a lot of ways to solve the financing problem, but some of it is people just need more money than they have access to. These things are still expensive, $250,000, $400,000. That's a lot of money for a moderate income household or a senior on a fixed income. And so they can't borrow enough with their income to finance the ADU. So one of the barriers that we're working on removing, in addition to just that they need more money, hence the state grant program that we successfully advocated for and got put in the state budget, but also changes to federal lending criteria. If a homeowner can't borrow to build an ADU to generate income to pay their mortgage because they don't have the income in place today to service that loan, well, how are they going to get the income from the ADU to pay more money for their mortgage more reliably? So one of the things we've been working on is working with the GSEs and federal finance regulatory ecosystem with other states at this point, because there's a lot of other people in this same national movement to allow more ADUs. We wrote cross-state letters saying, hey, folks, you need to allow the future income from the ADU to size the mortgage so that the homeowner can afford to build the ADU. And the federal agencies have recognized that, and so have academics that study this space. The Urban Institute recently was quoted as saying, if you want to make a dent in the housing supply crisis in America, you should do more ADUs, and you need to solve the ADU lending problem. So not only have we chipped away at it from the Casita Coalition point of view, but we've raised awareness of the whole federal agency ecosystem of funders and housing supply advocates to say, hey, this tool works, but we got to do more to remove barriers, particularly finance.
And I think our listeners would be really interested in well, where's that at? When we think about, hey, you've brought that attention to FHFA, the GSEs, in being able to use this future income, not realized, to rent out the ADU to help for the financing. Where is that today? Is that something we're going to see a change,
So
soon?
Freddie Mac is a result of not just our advocacy, but a lot of advocacy around the country from ADU thought leaders, now allows a portion of project rental income to be included to help borrowers qualify for a renovation loan, which can include an ADU. Fannie Mae allows future ADU income to in a new home purchase, so that if a first-time home buyer can't afford the mortgage by themselves with their income, they can count the future income value of the ADU and therefore be able to buy their first home, thanks to the income from an ADU that doesn't exist. So
Those are there today, right?
yes, those programs are there today as the result of advocacy of Casita and others. And challenges obviously still remain. But there's now a national attention to this issue all up and down the housing finance ecosystem. So lots of really good, smart people are working on how to fix this. And I'm hoping we'll see more progress in the coming years.
So tell me a little bit, that I think that's great information, is being able to use that future income to qualify for a home style renovation loan or home choice and put an AD unit in. That's fantastic. Interest rates tend to be currently playing a kind of a discouraging role in that decision, but we don't know what happens here in the near future or in the extended future. Katherine, can you tell us a little bit more about how HPP Cares gets involved in the process?
Definitely. So HPP Cares, like what I've already attributed, is we are one of some of the key components, or one of the contributors that amplify the impactful foundation of Casita Coalition. We're not only a 501c3, we're not only a HUD housing counseling agency regulated by HUD, the Housing Urban Development. We not only have certified counselors, we have ADU experts. But at the end of the day, most folks see a housing counseling agency as simply educators. And what they fail to realize is we are the frontline responders to the housing crises, in that we're seeing it firsthand. We're seeing the lack of affordable housing and rental apartments. We're seeing homeowners trying to figure out how to get that unpermitted unit permitted, or to house loved ones, et cetera, and move forward. So we are that go-to ADU resource, and that's what we've kind of evolved to. Through Casita Coalition, as I've indicated before, they have not only unlocked the grant funds, but now you're seeing the grant funds and HPP Cares be that living experiment. You're witnessing firsthand the impact and growth that ADU construction has had throughout the state of California through our organization, where we can speak to the fact that there is lack of financing, there is lack of, or issues with zoning, and so forth and so on, that the organization as a whole has been chipping away. That is what we do. We see it firsthand. We take consumers through the journey. Before we started the podcast, you indicated you went to, the site to try to see how you could build an ADU in your front yard, and how it was still very daunting. HPP Cares and my peers, other housing counseling agencies, not only in California, but throughout the state of California, are helping consumers be able to easily digest, give the education, show you how to design it, how to look to finance it, how to look to identify a contractor, how to then in turn become a landlord. Do you know how to become a landlord once you get that unit built and you've got that extra income coming in? Do you know how to handle those things? That is where HPP Cares as an organization steps in. That's the contributions that we bring to Casita Coalition. We show it that it can happen. You can have it in the California state where we're creating housing, but at the same token, we're also educating consumers. So that's what we do as an organization.
Now, who is is it like a consumer direct, do they just find you online and, and reach out, or is this something you partner with various, mortgage lenders or banks or credit unions on? How does the model work?
Great point. I will tell you, the opportunity that we have had with the state of California and this ADU grant has catapulted the conversation of housing counseling agencies. Most people don't even know about our services and the gem that we have with regards to resources and assistance that we can provide consumers in various facets. With that said, how do people find us? Most folks are directed to us by their local real estate agent because they're buying a home and they're looking for down payment assistance. Most mortgage companies would refer people to us. So I will tell you, at this point, we have created somewhat of a social, utilizing social media and things of that nature. And that's how folks find us. The conversation of creating more housing has started for people to be able to find organizations like myself, not only in California, but throughout the state, by basically just doing the Google search.
That's great. Now, how many people, you mentioned a little while ago about going viral. How many people has HPP Cares helped?
Currently, we are actively building throughout the state of California, and you say, wait a minute, building? She's a contractor too. You'd be surprised what we have under our little tool belt. Yes, we are actively building well over 2,700 ADUs. We were the largest subscriber provider and subscriber of majority of the Cal HAFA ADU grant program that Casita Coalition and Denise had firsthand in making sure it could get out to consumers. So I definitely have to take hats off to Denise, and
Well,
I'm even honored
while
to
we're
be a
in the
member.
Mutual Admiration Club, when we saw how smart Catherine's organization was at helping not just one or two homeowners, but thousands of people using online education and digital social media outreach, we thought that woman's got the solution set for how to really help low and moderate income homeowners in communities of color that Casita as a statewide organization can't touch. So we recruited her to be on the board to help share her worldly wisdom with the rest of us so that we can increase the impact and focus our efforts where they're needed the most. And the other thought I wanted to present is ADU finance is about having more money in the ecosystem easily available to consumers at lower incomes who have struggled to get that money, but also reducing costs so you don't have to borrow so much, right? If it's cheaper and easier and quicker, you don't need quite as much loan for quite as long to get it done. So Casitas really treats finance as a more money in the ecosystem, and you got to bring down the cost. So a lot of our state rule changes were designed to create a plug and play ADU box in a backyard, a zoning envelope that then manufactured housing suppliers could build into and know that they would get a building permit on every lot inside that defined area that state law created. So an example is there's another HUD counseling agency in the Inland Empire that is partnered with a manufactured housing company and is building $100,000 ADUs today and selling them to low-income homeowners in the Irvine Riverside area. They too are a HUD counseling agency, and their model is slightly different, but they're delivering hundreds of $100,000 ADUs to homeowners that need a mortgage helper, but can't afford $500,000 for a custom-built, highly designed stick frame ADU. So they're buying a manufactured home and putting that in their backyard. So barrier reduction comes in a lot of ways, and you got to attack the whole ecosystem. This is not a one and done policy space. And I hope your listeners want to be part of this journey with us, because we need to learn more. We need to learn from your listeners what they're experiencing, just like we needed to learn what Catherine's seeing as a HUD counselor in order for our policy impact to be sufficient to address the needs of the day. For example, we learned from Casita Builder members that the California Energy Code was shifting to require solar rooftop on every single ADU, which adds, $30,000 to the cost. And a lot of solar systems aren't small enough to fit on the roof of an ADU. So that the state was imposing a restriction that could not be met by the majority of homeowners. They weren't thinking about ADUs when they wrote the rule. They were thinking about McMansions and, the Inland Empire. So we went to them and said, hey, small homes don't need rooftop solar. They're naturally energy efficient. And after a year's worth of work, they agreed, and they removed the rooftop solar equipment requirement from smaller dwelling units applied statewide. So it helps homeowners materially to reduce those requirements. But Casita never would have known if we didn't have builders who were starting to see these requirements crop up when they were getting their building permits approved. So part of our work is growing the coalition. We encourage your listeners to become members. You can find us online. We're a 501c3. So if you really love us, you're welcome to support us with a donation. It's tax exempt. But more importantly, we need to know what you see. We need to see the world from your point of view so that we understand the barriers, not just to ADUs, but to all middle housing forms, so that we can start working on removing them. And that is an ongoing, you said it just right, Sean, it's a journey. We're together on a journey that is a learning journey and a working journey. And our work can't be smart if we're not constantly learning about what the challenges are that we need to be addressing. And that's why our work now has a national footprint. When we began, we were just, hey, let's change some California state laws and make ADUs easier. And now 4 years later, we're, hey, California can't do it alone. We need the federal government to respond. We need federal lending practices to change. Consumers know more when it's the same rule all over the state, and they can learn it. They don't have to learn a different rule every time they cross city lines. So we're learning as we go. We joke that we're building the airplane while we're flying it, because we want to have the smartest ADU plane in the hangar, and it's constantly being redesigned because we live in a complex, fast-moving world. So that's our mission, is to have more neighborhood scale homes in every neighborhood across California and, frankly, across the U.S. And we have lots of partners and thought partners across the country that we're really enjoying meeting and learning from.
No, that's great. You know, you kind of alluded to the conversation that we were having before, Denise, about me bringing up looking into what it would take to get an ADU here at our house, and you know, all of those requirements. You know, I went and looked at our local city website, and I was like, oh man, oh wow. You know, even with the knowledge that I have and the research on ADUs that I've done, preparing for all these different podcasts, you know, it's really overwhelming to sit there and go, okay, I got to go do this. And that's with the amount of regulation that you've already removed.
Oh yeah, but 5 years ago, there was no online piece of paper you could go to say how to do this, because the answer was always no. So
Yep.
we're better than we were. The answer is now yes, or yes, and then it gets complicated. So for folks who are not used to working in this space, they need help, whether that's a friendly planner at the zoning counter who's, wants to really help homeowners and help them through the process. Lots of cities in our state have ADU advocates that will meet with homeowners and run interference with other city agencies. San Jose has got a great model program in that space. And
Wow.
they really streamlined their ADU program so that it's very easy for homeowners in San Jose to do this. They had the first pre-approved plan program in the state, where you could go online and pick from one of 8 or 9 different plan sets from different companies, and you could figure out exactly what it would cost, see examples of that unit built on other people's properties, say, I want to buy one of those, and then their staff would get you through the process more quickly. Not every city is where San Jose is, so Casita's working to help educate them about what San Jose did and how great it is. The pre-approved plan concept was such a great idea. We took it to the state and said, hey, state, you should allow in every city in California any architect or builder to tick a box on an application form and have that plan be pre-approved forevermore till the building codes change, so that a homeowner can find it easily and say, hey, I just want one of those. Can I please have my building permit? And so now the state requires every city to allow pre-approved plans in California to make it easier for homeowners.
Like buying a car.
Like buying a car.
You know, we're kind of nearing the end of the podcast, and I'm really curious. You know, you've gone through a lot of the hurdles and the journey, and you know what's getting in the way today. You know, well, I'll ask each of you this question. Denise, we'll go with you first, and then Katherine. But if you could just snap your fingers, you know, and change one thing, it could be a regulation, it could be a policy, it could be the way that we do things related to ADUs. What would you change? What would your wish be?
I think that every state should consider doing what California did to remove just the barriers to ADUs, and system-wide finance reform to make it easier for homeowners to do this. And then I think the rest of us dig in and work through the remaining barriers. But I think that scale and national attention really matter to make it easier for millions and millions of homeowners to do this. And everyone should join the Casita Coalition. Can I get an and? Yes, and. Join the Casita Coalition, because we need all of you to make that vision possible.
That's awesome. All right, Catherine, what's your wish?
I will echo Denise's sentiment that, Casita Coalition needs the funding. They need the membership, so we can have those conversations so we know what they're doing in other areas. One of the many snaps, or one snap that I do have, is to at least start the conversation. What we found in some areas, they're not even having the conversation. So at least have that conversation to say, what could we do to create affordable housing? What could we do to create more housing in an area? And then secondly, it's just education. I cannot stress that enough. Having the ability, the wherewithal to make sure the HPP cares could be throughout the country to also do additional education, more so on the consumer side, where we're actually hand-holding, taking the homeowner from design, finance, construct, lease, and protecting their units so they know that this is palatable, helping them curate that design and formula. Those are my two snaps.
No, that's great. Now, if people wanted to get in touch with you, Catherine, at HPP Cares, what's the best way for them to reach out?
They can visit our website, which you'll see on the screen here, hppcares.org, or they can contact our office with the number that you see below.
Okay. And Denise, Casita Coalition, how do they get in touch with you?
We're on the web at casitacoalition.org.
Fantastic. And we'll host all that information here with the podcast. But this was absolutely fantastic having you both on the show. I want to have you back in the future. Love to get an update on how things are going, and wish you both the best of luck. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sean. It's been a pleasure having this conversation. We really appreciate you raising awareness of this issue.
I love the subject. Thank you both.
This podcast is intended for educational and informational purposes only and does not replace independent professional judgment. Land Gorilla Inc. makes no representations, warranties, or promises for and disclaims any express or implied warranties related to content. Before acting on any information, you should consider the appropriateness of the information as it pertains to your unique business needs.